Everyone, welcome back. So in today's video we are going to look at array methods. In the previous video we looked at loops. We also looked at arrays before that, and in the arrays we saw last time we did some simple array methods like finding the length, adding items into an array, removing items into an array. We looked at those simple array methods, and in today's video we are going to look at more array methods, and we're going to focus on the commonly used ones. Okay, so there are very many methods that can help us perform different tasks depending on what you are trying to do. Okay, so let's dive in and look at different array methods. Okay, and the first method you're going to look at is a slice method, and at least this method you remember it from the strings. So we looked at slice method in strings, and it was actually returning a shallow copy of a portion of a string, and actually it does the same thing in the arrays. So a slice method, it returns a portion of an array into another array. Okay, and the good thing is that you can actually tell it where to start and where to end. Okay, and you can see the syntax for this method is that it has, on an array, it takes in the starting point and the end point. Okay, so the starting point is optional. If you don't pass in the starting option, the starting point will be assumed to be 0. So if you don't pass in anything and you pass in only one thing, it will assume that the starting point is 0. And also the end option is, the end argument is also optional, and the ending index of the selection is always exclusive, and if not provided, the selection ends at the index of the last element. So if you don't pass in anything, it is going to go up to the last item. So in the first case, let's look at, for instance, you have languages. You have an array containing different programming languages: JavaScript, Python, C, C++, and Java. So if you just go and slice and you create a new array, so you can see here that we are creating a new array here, and you can see it is languages, so it is taking in this array here, dot slice, and you see we are passing in no any argument we are passing in here at this point. There is no any argument you have passed in, and you can see when you console.log the new array, it will output all items in the array. So it will assume the starting point to be 0 and the last point to be the last index of the last item. Okay, so at this point it will simply copy all the elements in this and it puts them in the new array. Okay, so that is the first thing, and you can go ahead and also slice from a specific index. So for instance, slicing from the third element, so you can see this is at position 0, position 1, position 2, position 3, and position 4. So if we wanted to slice from index 2, that means we are at C here, and that means it will take C up to last. If you don't indicate the end option, the end argument, it means it will continue up to the last element. So that means if you put in slice 2, this means that slice all elements starting from 2. So it will go to 2 and it will take in all these ones. And you can see if you console here, new array 1, it actually consoles these 3 items. Okay, so you can also slice from the second element to the first element. So you can indicate the starting point. So for instance, if you put 1 to 4, it will slice from 1, which is Python, and then it will continue up to the last one, which is Java. And remember, you said it is the last one is exclusive, so the end index of the selection is exclusive. So that means that if it is selecting, it will select the 1 from 1, which is Python, 2, 3, and 4, it is exclusive. So it will just take in Python, C, C++, and that's what it has done. So we can just go and do an example. So let me go to VS Code, okay, and I can simply just copy this one, okay, and go to VS Code. So I've already created my 2 files, app.js and index.html. So and I've already linked it here, and the only thing is to put the far keyword here, okay, and inside here is the so create an array of languages. So you can see we have an array of these programming languages, okay, and on this new line I'm just going to slice. So the first method we are looking at is the slice method. So let me just put here slice method, and just know that this one, it returns a portion of an array into a new array, okay, returns a portion of an array. So in the first case, if you want to use it to duplicate an array, you could just say const new array is equal to languages dot slice. So we said if you don't pass in any of the arguments, which both of them are optional, so if you don't push anything, it will assume a starting point to be 0 and last point to be the last item, and it will just going to return all the items in that array. So if we console.log here new array like so, so let me just go to the browser, just right click on this, open with live server. So I'm opening, or you could even click on this button, it says go live, okay, and let's go to console, okay. You can actually load here, and you can look at all the items in the array, or the 5 items in the array, okay. So that is the slice method. The slice method, the way it was working, let me put here some sort of h1. It says array methods, okay. So that is the first use case of a slice method. You can return all of them, or you could go ahead, so we could just say const new array 1. So we could return a portion, for instance languages dot slice. So if for instance you pass in 2, what it's going to do is that it is going to count 0, 1, 2. So it's going to return from C to the last. So if I now go and console.log this new array 1, and you can see it is returning from C up to the last one, okay. So this is great. So another thing you can do, you can specify the start and end. So new array 3, actually just say 2, and we could just say languages dot slice, and you can pass in the starting point, let's say 1, and you can just say up to 4. So when you say 1 to 4, so this is 0, JavaScript is 0, and it is just say 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the first one, and it will be excluded. Okay, so at this point it's going to start from this one, but it will exclude this one, so it will return Python, C, and C++. So if we console.log now these two here and go to here, and you can see it is Python, C, C++, and it has not returned Java because it is on 4th. Okay, so this is a slice method. Let's go ahead and look at other methods. So the slice method is pretty easy because we did the same thing. In strings. So it's the same thing, the same concept like strings, it extracts the same thing, and you can see that it also accepts the negatives, and we said the negatives, it is just the same, but it starts counting from the last item. So if you look at the array, if you did console the new array and you're sizing from 0 to -1, so it is starting from this 0, and -1 is this item here. So it's going to put this, and this. So this -1 is actually Java. Okay, so you can also print from the third element to the last one, and when you put this one becomes the starting point, which is actually so -1, -1, -2, -3. So this is the starting point and up to the last. Okay, and that's why it is doing that. So you can also just go ahead and just do one example whereby you can just say const new array 3, and we can just say languages dot slice, and in this case we can go ahead and pass in the starting point. So if you put a starting point maybe 1 to -1, this one means that start from 0, 1 to -1, which is actually this one, and to be excluded. Okay, so if we now print, it is actually the same thing like this one. Okay, so if we now print actually this new array 3, it is going to give the same thing. Okay, so that is how you use the slice method. It is pretty easy, and we had used it in the strings, so it should not give you any hard time. So let's just go to the next method. So the next method is includes. Okay, so this is a very interesting method. So the include method checks if an array contains a specific element or not. Okay, yeah, so sometimes you'll be checking, for instance, you can imagine you have a list of element containing classes or containing anything. You can check if in that array something exists in that array. Okay, so the include, it can take into values, the values to it takes in the value to find and from what index. Okay, and it returns true if the such value is found anywhere within the array, and false if the find is not found anywhere in the array. And this method is very useful most times when you're just doing some logic. You see that it is very, very useful, most especially if you want to know whether you should add something or if you should remove it. Sometimes you want to first check, does it exist first? If it exists, don't do it, or if it exists, do it. So let's do some let's do some example here. So you are still using the languages. So if you want to check if it C is there, you can see what it you just text in check languages that includes C, and if you console.log, it can be true or false. So for instance, let's do this. So we have our languages. I'm just going to comment here. The second method is includes. Okay, and this one returns it returns true or false. True if an array contains the search value, and it returns false if it does not find. So for instance, we have const. So const students. So just say create students, and let's have maybe their names. So we have John, we have Gerard, we have Alex. So let's just put here Alex, and so we have also Sam. So you can just go ahead and put any items you want. So want to check for a certain name if it exists in this array. Okay, so for instance, we can just say console.log students. Okay, you can even just save it in let's just here and just say const is John, so this one we could just say if students dot includes, and we can pass in the name we are looking for. And if we say John, and this console.log is John, so if you console.log that one, you will see that it is true. Okay, so it is returning true because John is inside this array. So let's say we console.log let's say who so let's get Joy. Okay, so let's put a name that actually doesn't exist. So here is put is Joy, and you can see it returns false. So this can be very powerful. It might look a very simple method. Actually, it's very easy to use, but it is very powerful. So for instance, we can use it to conditionally add things or remove things. So for instance, we could just say if, okay, if is Joy. So okay, we could even just say if students here, and we know this one returns true or false. So we say if students dot include Joy. If it is true, if this is true, we could just say console.log the array already contains Joy, or Joy is already present. Joy is already present, and else we could add. Okay, so here we could put else. So it means here actually Joy is not there, and we could take students dot push. So we could now push Joy. Okay, so if Joy is there, then we don't do anything, but if he's not there, then we can actually add him, and after that we can console.log here students to see if actually has been added. Okay, so in this case you can see that Joy is not there. You can actually comment this one. So you can see that Joy is not there, and so that means it's going to be added. You see, So it has run the other one, and you can see it has added joy at the end of the day. Okay, so you could even just say here, we could now remove it. Okay, so we could just say if students dot includes joy, if joy is there already, remove it. If it's not, then add it. So we could do that. So here we could just say students. So here we could just say students dot pop. So remember the pop method, students dot pop, and we can pop. I don't think pop takes in it will pop the last one, so it will be joy. So, and we can also go ahead and console.log students, and at this point joy is already there. They are going to pop. You can see the original array here is not having joy, so that's why it is adding it there. So yeah, so that is how you can logically do this. Okay, this is how you can logically do something like this, and all this is because of the includes. So you can it returns false if something is there, and returns it returns true if an element exists in an array, or it returns false if that element is not there. So we can use it logically to perform different things if it returns true or false. So it is a powerful array method that you can actually also use, and most of these ones are going to make more sense when we start actually doing some projects. You'll see how useful these array methods are going to be so much in use. Okay, so the next method is price. Now if there is anything that is confused with slice, so we have a slice method that returns a portion of an array, and then we have a splice method. Now even me, I remember when I was getting into arrays, I used to confuse the slice method with the splice method. So the splice method has nothing to do with the slice method. Okay, so the slice method it lets you actually modify the content of the array, and it really modifies the original array. That is the most first difference, is that in the original one, the slice method has nothing to do with modifying the array. It simply returns the new array. But the splice method actually affects the original array. It actually does its all activities or tasks on the original array. So it actually modifies that very array. So you can see this method modifies the original array and returns the removed elements as a new array. So it also removes items. Okay, so if you have an array of 20 items, you can simply splice it and you get only a few of the items you want out of it. So how it works, for instance, if you had the months and you have January, Feb, Monday and Tuesday, you could go ahead and splice days. So when you splice and you put only one number like this, what it means is that go to this position and remove all elements up to the last one. So it will go to 0. So this one, if we give these ones indexes here, so this is 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so when you just say splice 2 and you put 2, it's going to go 0, 1, and 2. So it starts from here and it will extract these ones, and you can see it has put them into this one, days. So if you console.log days, you get an array of the removed items. Okay, so that is the first use case. Now if this one was slice, it would do only console.log Monday, because it would not include even this last one. I think it would actually include this one, it would not affect the original array. So what I am trying to mean is that let's do this. So I'm just going to go here, do this. So right now here we are looking at this price method. Okay, so this price method, it also it returns the removed items from an array. So if you had months, and in the months you have Jan, Feb, and all these ones you have mixed with some days, so you could extract these last two elements, or that's not even extracting, but actually removing them and putting them into a new array. So you can see here, we can create a new array and we get the months and remove the item starting from the index 2. So this one is the index at which is going to start removing items. Okay, so if we now console.log days, you can see that it actually returns let me just console.log here, console.log, and let's say pass in days, and you can see here we have Monday and Tuesday. But now we can also console.log months, and you will see that it has Jan and Feb. So it means that actually this was removed from the original array, and that's what we are saying, that the splice method actually affects the original array. Okay, so be careful. So in some cases you would first want to make a copy of the original array and start manipulating that one before doing methods like this one, as the splicing, because it affects actually the original array. Okay, so that is great. So now let's see more about this splice method. So what we have seen is that if you pass in one parameter, it will act as the start index where the splicing will start from. So if you pass in 2, it will get elements from index 2. This is what we have done. Now another good thing with it is actually you can specify another parameter, and you can tell it how many items to remove. Okay, you can go ahead and tell it how many items to remove. Okay, so let's say we have also, let's just say days of the week, just say const days of the week, and we just have an array here. And the first one we have Monday, we can have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I think we can stop even there. Let's just stop on Friday. Okay, so that is enough to demonstrate what we want. So if we want to extract from Tuesday, we could just say const, okay, some days, and just say some days due to lack of a good name, and I could call this days of the week dot splice. Okay, and I can take in where to start from. So I can decide to start from 2. So this is 0, 1. So I can decide to start from index 1, and I can also tell how many items to remove. So I can just say remove 1, 2, 3, and I can specify 3. And this console.log both some days, and let me also console, let me put comma here, and I say days of the week. So let me console those two and you'll see. So the first one have a typo here, some days. Okay, so you can see we have some days. It extracted from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It put them in some days. And you can see the remaining ones in the days of the week is Monday and Friday. Okay, so this is a very interesting method, and normally it is used when you are getting data from an API. You can go ahead and truncate only to show only the maybe the first 5 items only from that. You can imagine you have 100 items, but you only want to show only 5. So you can simply use the splice method to extract only 5 items of an array. Okay, and it can also take in more parameters. Okay, so we have seen this, where it takes in 2 parameters, and the first parameter is the start index, and the second one is how many items should be removed from starting from that index. Okay, and another one it can do is also that it can add in more items. It can add in, and it can take in values. So you could just say splice at index 2. This means that at index 2, remove 2 items, but also add these 2 items, or add these items you have. So this is nice. So we have already months. So let's use this very example we have here. So we have days of the week. Okay, so at this point we removed. Okay, so we could just say go to Thursday. So we could just go to this point, remove 2 items, and then add more 2. Okay, so for instance, let's say days of the week. I'm just going to copy this one, and then I will put it like so that we use it for testing. So I'm just going to go to you can leave it, go to this Tuesday. So that is 1. Go to index 1, which is Tuesday. Remove 3 items, that is 1, 2, 3. So you could even go and remove 4 items, but we could tell it to add more. So for instance, you can add Saturday, comma, add Sunday. Okay, so now if we console both some days and days of the week, so look at this. So some days we have let's first remove some of these things here, these console.logs here, so that we have a clear of what actually we are looking at. Okay, so let's now see what you have. Okay, so you can see on line 31, so some days you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and now you can see that it actually added on that position, it added in Saturday and Sunday. So it can also be used to add elements into an array, and the good thing is you can dictate where it should be added. Okay, so you can imagine if you wanted only to add, okay, Sunday and Saturday at the end here, what we would do. So let me copy this one again to demonstrate what I want. So if wanted to add this Sunday at the last, so you could just go and say 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we could just say go to index 4 and remove 0 items. So if I indicate 0 here, it means that I'm telling it not to remove anything, but to add Sunday and Saturday. So if we do that, Now some days will be null, it has no element removed, but days of the week is having 2 items added. So if you check, you can see this is an empty bracket, an empty array, no any item, because we did not remove any item here. But days of the week, you can see actually we have added Sunday, Saturday and Sunday, and you can see by the way it has added at index 4. Okay, so it will add exactly 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to add exactly at this point. Okay, so that is great. That is great, guys. We are doing well, and if you're liking the content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That is the only way you can support us for now, and you can like and share the video also with others. So let's move into the next. So as we said, you can remove 0 items and you can add items. Okay, so now that is the first part of arrays, array methods, and the first ones we saw. They were pretty somehow not advanced. So let's look at advanced array methods. Okay, let's look at advanced array methods. So the first one we are looking at is the map. Okay, so we are starting with the map method. So by far the map method is one of the most used. In fact, most of the times you're going to be using the map method and the ForEach method to loop through an array. So understanding the map method is the most crucial thing in all array methods that you are going to meet. The map method is by far the most useful and is very useful. So pay much attention about this method. Okay, so the map methods create a new array with the result of calling a function for every array element. So I want you to understand that statement. The statement includes key terms here. I'm just going to highlight some of these key terms. Okay, it creates a new array. That is one thing to note, with the result of calling a function. Calling a what? So it calls a function. So calling a function for every array element. For every array element. So those are key terms. Okay, so let's look at what it does. The map method, it takes in a callback, the function called for every element, and you can see here, as we said, calling a function for every element. So it takes in a function which you normally call a callback function. Just know a callback function is just a function that will be called at some time after. So the function called every after element, it returns values added to the new array. It takes in the current value. So you can see the callback function takes in the current value. So that is something also to note. Returns a new array with elements as the return values from the callback function for each element. So other things to note about the array method is that it does not change the original array, and that's why we like it. We like it over the ForEach method because it does not change or modify the original array. The map executes a callback once for each of the elements in order and does not execute the callback for array elements without values. Okay, so let's take an example of an array method. So assuming you have an array containing foods. Okay, so these are foods. You have I don't know if this is a pizza or a samosa. I think it's a pizza. Okay, pizza. You have here a burger. You have and this is what? This is a bread or something. So you have these foods, and you could add, for instance, you could just go and add a a fry on each of the foods. Let's just not even just complicate. Let's first look at the easy one, like this one. Okay, so let's just say we have numbers 1 to 4. So we want to square each of the numbers. Okay, we want to square each of the numbers. Of course, we did this with the for of loop. You could just use a for of loop to do that that computation or that task, but we want to use the map method. Okay, the map method will just say numbers. So numbers is the array method, the array containing the numbers, dot map, and it takes in a function, a callback function. So this one is the callback function. This one, this is the callback. And what do they say? The callback. So the callback function, it takes in the current element, or it has access to this item. Okay, it has access to this item. Okay, let's just demonstrate using some many examples. I know this takes time to sink in, but just grab a cup of coffee and just let's go on a drive. So we are just on a map. This is a map, a map method. So let me just go a map method. So this one calls a function for each of the elements. So for each of the element, and you're going to see most of all other remaining methods, they do the same thing. They call actually a function for each of the method. So you just say you have const numbers. Okay, so you just say const ages, and want to compute the date of birth. So I have here ages, and let's say 23, 18, 72, why not? Let's just say add 56, and let's add 12 or 13 years, and let's say 25. So these ones are ages, different ages. So we would want to go through all these ages, and then we compute the year of birth for each of the age. Okay, so of course, if this was a task given to you to just loop through the ages and compute, you would, there are very many ways you could do this. You could use a for of loop, you can use for each loop, and you can also go ahead and use the map. So in this case, we are going to use the map method. Okay, so const, I'm just going to say const birth years. Okay, and it's going to be ages dot map. Okay, and inside here it takes in a callback, and you can see even here VS Code tells you very well it takes in a callback function. And the function, if you go down here, if you hover, let me hover again, and you can even scroll, and you can see it takes in a callback function on each element of an array and returns an array that contains the result. Okay, and even go ahead and tell you the callback function accepts up to 3 arguments. Okay, it will accept in the item, the index, and even the array. So but at this point we are interested only into the number. So this age here, it can have access to the age, and we are going to use an arrow function because it is the most easy one here. Okay, so we could just take in a function as usual. We could just say do function, and this function takes in age. Okay, it takes in an item here. It has access to these items inside. So it is the callback function that has the access to the edges, not the map itself, but the callback function you pass in the map is the one which has access to the item in the array. So it has this, and we can go ahead and return something. So at this point, for instance, we could say return. Okay, so what are we returning? We could say return 2023. So we are in 2023 minus age. This is how we get when that person was born. Okay, so let's go ahead and console.log birth years, like so, birth years. And okay, so you can see that, and we could just also console.log here the ages so that we see what it has done. Ages. So if I go here, you see the ages. 23 is 2000, 18 is 2005, 72 is 1951, 56 1967, 13 2010, and 25 is 1998. So you can see some most important things to note. Okay, some important things to note is that you have an array and you want to do a map on it. The most important thing to remember here is that the map method takes in a callback function. Okay, you don't have to write anything like callback anywhere, just to know it is a function. And even if you put this function outside, if you put this function outside and you simply call it inside here, it still works. But in most cases, we always write it like this, write it inside. Okay, and sometimes we also use an array, an arrow function to simplify this whole thing. But just remember, it takes in the callback function, and it is the callback function that has access to the items in the array. Okay, so that is great. So now at this point, I think we could just do another one. So numbers, const numbers. I don't know if we already have these numbers. Okay, let's just say numbers. Okay, numbers is equal to, let's just create some numbers here, and we just say 1 2 3, why not 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, so if we wanted to get the square, if we wanted to square any of these ones, you know now how we do this one. Okay, so the first thing is we can create another variable, const squared numbers, or num squared. Num squared, and we could square all these items. So we call the numbers, and we call map method, and remember it takes in the callback function. Okay, so the callback function, now I'm just going to use an arrow function. So you can say num, and it returns num squared, like so. So you can see how short an array function can be. This one means that it is a function that takes a num as an argument, and it returns this arrow here, means return. So it takes in this number, any of these numbers here, and we have called it num, and it returns num squared, which is num star star 2. Okay, so if we go and now console.log numbers, So here, let's say numbers, and then here, let's say num squared, or numbers squared. So if we go here, you can see that we have these numbers squared on each of them. Okay, so that is the map. Another thing to note is that actually you can have the second argument. Okay, it can take the second argument, which is the index. Okay, so if you wanted to so access the index, and in the future that index is going to be important, but at this point you could just simply take it like that. Okay, in the future you have access actually to this. You could put comma here, and you have access to the I, and the I is the index. Okay, the I is the index. Okay, this one I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to show that, but you could just also have access to index, and you can do whatever you want with the index. Okay, so that is the first advanced method we have seen. Okay, so we could talk a lot about the array that map method, but it is the same thing. You have to remember it takes in a function, and the function is going to have access to the item in the array. Okay, so let's look at the another method, which is going to be the ForEach method. So the ForEach method exactly is the same as the map method. I think the only difference is that one modifies the original array, another one it doesn't modify the original array. So if you know actually like if you know the map method, you will find that actually you also know the ForEach method. So the ForEach method is the same thing, and it is very easy also to use. So let's just have prices as this one, the name suggests. So down here, let me just put prices, not prices, but for each method, I'm just going to say const prices, and it's going to be an array of prices. So let's say 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 4,000 or 40,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and you can just also put 5,000. So I have here prices ranging from 1,000 to 5,000, and now it does the same thing. For instance, you could just go on these prices and you do something. For instance, you can add a discount or whatever. You could just go ahead and do the discount on these ones. Okay, and maybe some const discounted prices. Is it discounted or I don't know, but let's just get something here where we are going to add some discounts or allowances or whatever. So we could access prices, okay, dot for each. So you call this method for each, and it also takes in a callback function. Okay, it takes in a callback function, and in that function, so we could just say function, and in the function you can have also access to the price. So you have access to the price and even the index. Okay, the same thing like the map method, you have access to the both of the two, and you could just console.log price and even index. Okay, you could just have like first like test that, and you can see you have 10,000 at position 0, 2,000 at position 1. So you can see really you have all these things, you have access to both of the position or the index, and you have the price. Okay, so if I wanted to say the to return, maybe, so I could return something here. For instance, I would return price, add maybe 10%, which is maybe price plus 0.1 times price. Okay, like if I wanted like the discounted price added like 10%, it would do that. And I would even neglect the index, and I only focus on the one I want. And you can see and by the way, another thing to note, you can see that we returned this, but it is not let's just console.log this discounted prices, and we see, and yeah, undefined. Okay, so that is one thing to note. Okay, this is one thing to note. So for instance, is one thing to note, what does this for each function return. Okay, I don't know, and it returns, you can see here, I wrote here, it returns undefined. Okay, it returns undefined. So itself, if you put, that's why actually it affects the original array. Itself, it does not save things to itself. So for instance, if you do this, it does not actually return anything here. Like if you saved it in something, it does not, you get, it does not return anything to itself. But if for instance you do this, I guess, so if even if we don't have that, and we have prices dot for each function, and we take in price and index, and we say so we could now console.log, so, or we could now create a new array and push in these figures, but itself, it actually does not return anything. That is something to note, the difference with the map method, and that's why we prefer the map method than this one. So I can just console.log this. Okay, and you can leave out the index. Okay, and yeah, discounted price, it is this one. So you can check here, and it has actually added those percentages. And if you wanted, and you can see this is just like a normal loop. So this is just acts like a normal loop. It has nothing to do with the map. They all loop through, but the map, it returns an array, which is very, very important. But for this one, it does not. So if you wanted to create a new array from this one, is you could just create here, as we had created discounted prices. So let me just say const discounted prices, and I could create it as an empty array. And as I'm going through discounted, so as I'm going through, I would just now get this, the discounted price. So I could just say const discount. I could call it discount, and I could name it to be this thing here. Okay, so I could just say const discount is price plus 0.1 times price, So after getting that, I could now push it. So discount price dot push, and I push in discount. Okay, so this is a trick. If I want this to come up with a new array, I would have to first create the array here. I create it empty, nothing in it, but then here I can populate it. I go through prices, do the discount, and then I can push these figures inside here. So now if we go ahead and we say console.log discounted prices, like so, you see we have a new array now with discounted prices. And that's how you can tweak it, or that is how you can go about it if you wanted to return a new array using the for each. But the overall, most of the times we use the map method. Okay, but this one for each sometimes is also powerful, and sometimes you simply use the for each if you are doing a small task. Okay, so that is great. At least we have got some conclusions. The first one is that the for each method returns an undefined. So it does not save the new array or does not return a new array. It returns an undefined, but it simply does something on those items in that array, as we have demonstrated here in this example. Next method after the for each method is the reduce method. Now, reduce method are those methods that they will help you. They are not mostly used. They are used in if you are doing an e-commerce. So if you are doing an e-commerce, it is normally used on the cart. Getting the total sum of the items in the cart is the most method we normally use, the reduce method. And the reduce method, to understand it very well, the reduce method executes a reducer function. Hear that, a reducer function on each element of an array and returns a single output value. So it is the only method you give an array of numbers and it will return a single value. Whether you are subtracting or you are adding those values, at the end of the day, it is going to come up with one number or one value. So it takes in, this is the syntax, it takes in the array, it takes in a callback function, and this callback function takes in two things. Okay, and you can see here it also has a third or the second. Let me get here my pen. This is a serious function, a serious method. So the first thing you have to note here is, let's go first back here. So on the array, you call the reduce method. The reduce method takes in two parameters, and one is optional. So this one is the callback function, and the callback function here takes in two parameters, the accumulator and the current value. Okay, so the current value will be the value accessing in the array, and this is the accumulator as it is adding or it is reducing as we are going on other values. And the third value is the initial value, and this one sometimes is optional. Okay, is optional, and if you don't pass in any, it takes it as 0. So here it will be 0 by default. So the reduce function takes in the callback function, and this is we have talked about this one, and it takes in the callback function takes in the accumulator and the current value. The accumulator is the callback's return values, and the current value is the element being passed from the array, and the initial value, which is optional, a value that will be passed to the callback function on the first call. So for instance, if you are summing from 2000, okay, you would pass in 2000, but if you don't pass it, it will take it as 0. If not provided, the first element acts as the accumulator. Okay, so that is something to note also. If you don't pass anything, the first element is taken as the accumulator on the first call, and the callback won't execute it again. Okay, so the first to understand is what does this return. So the reduce method returns a value. Okay, it returns a what? It returns a value. It returns a single value resulting after reducing the array. So the reduce executes a given function for each value from left to right, does not change the original array. That is something to note, and it almost always safer to provide the initial value. Okay, so we can go ahead and now look at some of examples. So let's see this example here. So in this example, we have an array of numbers, and we want to sum all these numbers in the array. That is our intention. Would want to sum 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, and we get the total sum. So as we said, it takes in a function, so you would just do this function outside. It is okay to do that function even for the past methods we saw. You can first do this function outside, and the function has got its some reducer, and it takes in the accumulator and the current value, and it will return for the sum. We want to add these numbers. Okay, so it will be the accumulator plus the current value, and it will do this for all values if you pass it into the reduce method. But in most cases, as we said, we always do the arrow function, and it would be this version. Let's just do an example here. Let's do the example. So I'm just going to go to my VS Code, and I just put here reduce method, and this returns a single value from an array. Okay, so for instance, const max. So let's say we have max for a student, and we want to get his sum. Okay, so he has maybe math. So for math, he has 76, 81 English, 90, 93 science, and let's say 88 in social studies. Okay, so we have the marks here. So we would want to get the total of the mark. So total mark here. So const total mark would equal to, so we want to do the sum of all those numbers. Okay, so total mark, of course, we could just say now is equal to max dot reduce. Okay, so what does the reduce takes in? It takes in a function, and this callback function takes in two things. It takes in the accumulator. Actually, you don't also have to write this. It already know if I say accumulator and the current value, which is maybe value, the current value, and this is going to return. So what do we return here? So return, what do we want to return? Accumulator. Remember, you have to use the same figures you have here. So it is accumulator plus the value. Okay, so we are returning accumulator plus the value. So if now console.log total mark, and we could just first take off these ones. So if you console.log total mark, and voila, 338. Okay, I want you to remind you how we are doing this. So the purpose of the reduce method is, and I repeat, the purpose of the reduce method is to come up with a single value, and in most cases is if you are looking for the sum or the difference. Okay, if you are looking for the sum or the difference is why you use this one. Okay, so you find you have this you have the max, and you pass in a callback function, and this callback function takes in two accumulator and the value. And we said if you don't pass in here any other parameter, like say 100, if you pass in 100, they will start doing this whole accumulation from 100. If you don't do it, they will start from here. Okay, okay, so this is how we do the reduce method, as simple as that. And understanding this method will help you a lot. So you can use it to do the difference. Like if you want to subtract them, you would just say accumulator minus the value, and to keep on subtracting. Okay, cool. So we are about to end the most common ones. Okay, let me go to the next, and I guess it must be the final one. Okay, so the last method we are going to look at is the filter. Okay, so the filter method, as you can hear, it filters out an element, or it filters out elements that satisfies a given condition. Okay, so let's dive into the filter method. So the filter method returns a new array. By the way, that thing of knowing what that method returns is very important. Okay, when you are reading about the array methods, by the way, we have more than 50 array methods. There are so many, but the ones I'm covering here are the most important ones that you are going to meet every time. So the filter method returns a new array with all elements that pass the test defined by a given function. It is as summarized as that. It returns, so the key points here to note, it returns a new array. That is good. With all elements that pass a test defined by a given function. So it also takes in a function. It takes in a callback function. Okay, and it will only return the numbers that pass the test that was given in that function. So for instance, you could have the function outside if you wanted, for instance, this one, and you have a function that checks an even number. So if a number is divisible by 2, return true, else return false. So this one, if you pass it into the filter method, as you can see down here, we are passing it check even, it is going to return this one. Okay, so let's do this. So we have already numbers. I don't know now what we can exhaust. Okay, so we could have edges. Let me we could say const what now? Const let's say const student edges, and let's have an array of edges. Okay, so let's just have 10, 30, 17, 36, 78, and maybe 15, 16, and 22. So we have the mixed ages here. So for instance, we would want sort. Here. Would want sort the ages which can vote. Okay. So if we wanted to say eligible age for voting, so const ages eligible to vote. So we know the age that is eligible to vote are the ages above 18. So we could come and say, okay, students age dot filter. Remember, what does filter takes in? It takes in a function. Okay, it takes in a what? It takes in a function, and in this function we have access to the age. Okay, and we could go ahead, sorry, I don't know what I did. So go ahead and return. So what do we want to return here? Okay, we want to return age that is greater than 18. So we could want to say return age greater than 18. So this is the logic. This is the pass, the test. If you remember very well, here we said there is something here. We said returns a new array with element that passed the test defined by the given function. So the test they mean is actually a condition that must be fulfilled by these items. So you have items and you have a criteria you want them to fill. Okay, so you go down here, filter age, and so we access ages or age of any in this array, and we would want to filter ages who are only greater than 18. So if we now console.log ages eligible to vote. So if you look at that, 30, 36, 78, and 22. Okay, and this is a very powerful method, because when we are doing things on the front end, you can imagine you have data in the UI. So for instance, we could just go ahead, by the way, create some array, for instance, students. And if we have already like students is equal to, I think students we have cannot be redeclared. Okay, so just create another one. Let's just say citizens, and it can be an array of objects. So you could define them as objects. Okay, and this is the first of its kind, and the data in the arrays is just like this. So you could have an object where you have the name. Okay, you could have the name, so John, age 23, employed false. Okay, married, you could even just go and say married, and you could also say false. And we could duplicate this one for different people. So comma, we could just say Mary, and we could just say here is male, or we could just even say gender here, and the gender we could just say male. Okay, and here the gender we could just say female. Okay, always put a comma if you're creating objects. So this is an object with values, and they are all like citizens, and this is most data is ever in this format, so you have to get used to actual data in this format. So let's do another one. Maybe Sarah is also a lady, and we could change the ages here. So for John is that let's start to be 17 here. Okay, and is female, employed, false, married, false. Okay, so we could just go, who is this? So let's just say employed for this guy to be true. So that we have some changing fee, and then we could just go ahead and we also look at Sarah. Let's just say 30. She's gender female, employed false, but married true. And let's look at only one more individual. We could also look at Alex. Okay, age 35, male, and employed. We could just also true, married true. Okay, so let's have this the data. So you can first console this. You can first console citizens to confirm that this is an array. By the way, some of you may just say this is the first time you are looking at an array like that, but you could look at the array. You see that citizen is actually an array of objects. Okay, is an array of objects, and most data in the database is ever kept like this. So you have to get used to extracting data in this format. Okay, so for instance, if we wanted to access now, we could go through, or we could look through this one. So for instance, we can start now analyzing this data. For instance, we could want only the females. Okay, you can imagine we want only citizens who are females. Okay, so we could start now analyzing this data. So for instance, const female citizens, I don't know. So we could just now access citizens, which is an array dot filter. Okay, the filter takes in a function. It takes in a function, and this function we access a citizen. So remember, we access a citizen here, and what do we want with this citizen? What do we want? We want a citizen whose gender is female. So we could just access a citizen dot gender, okay, is equal to female. Okay, we want to return only the gender, or want citizens whose gender are equal to female. And if you do that, you see, first way, what are we consoling? Let's go down here, console.log female citizens, like so. And I don't think if we need these 3 here, they must be maybe 2, I guess. Okay, wait a minute. Return, remember that return keyword, and I think here we can add this. Remember that return keyword, by the way. That's why I like using the arrow function. I like using the arrow function. The arrow function would be much more better. So let's copy this and put it down, and we look at the arrow function way of doing it. So the arrow function would have passed in the citizen. There's no need of writing a function here. Okay, pass in a citizen and simply return. Okay, return. There is no need of these things here. Okay, So even let me see. So citizen.filter, it takes in this, okay, citizen, and return citizen.gender is equal to female. Remove this. As simple as that. As simple as that. And if you console the citizen, and you have the two items, Mary and Sarah. Look at that. You see that? So you have now, you can now go ahead and manipulate data at highest level, okay? You can manipulate that at the highest level. You can use this, and if you're not familiar with the why I don't normally use this one, no, this one is because you have to write this word return, but this one you can simply just write it like this, okay? But if it is hard for you to master this one, you can actually adopt this one. The same thing, just to remember, let me just first put off this. To remember one thing is that the filter takes in a function, and the function has access to an item in the array, which is a citizen, and then you must provide a logic that has to be passed by that citizen. And in this case, we want the citizen's gender should be equal to female. So if we wanted people who are employed, okay, so down here I could just say employed citizens, and I would want now to return a citizen whose employment status is equal to true. Okay, so you would just go ahead and say true here. Okay, but even if you just say return citizen.employed, it would know that it should compare it to this one. But you can go ahead and do that, and you can see it also gives you what are we consoling here? So console.log employed citizens, and it also gives you two people, John and Alex. Okay, so this is how you go ahead and use the filter method. Is a very powerful method. The reduce method is very powerful. The map method is very powerful, and those are the most used methods that you will meet in most of the cases. Okay, so the filter method is very powerful, and we use it most of the times to do a lot of logic. Okay, and that is basically how you do it. So we have taken a lot of time, and this has come to an end. Okay, thank you for being part of this. But before we end, I took some time to organize something like this. You have the these are some of the methods. If we have not covered the end of the method into this one, you can go and read about them. Okay, I talked about the most important ones. Okay, the ones I remember we talked about these ones, the pop ones, and in this one we have not talked about in any of these ones, but there is, you can look about reverse and sort and even fill. The only one we have talked about is map, there is, and filter. Okay, and slice and concat, we talked about it. But then there is this one of flattening. I will not look at these ones, but you would want to research about flat and flat map. And then we have also not looked at this one. This is finding item based on the index. You can also look at these ones, but we looked at includes. Okay, we have also not done this every and sum. We looked at reduce. Okay, for each, and we also at some point looked at join method. When we are looking at strings, we talked about the join method. So you see, we talked at specific those methods that are more popular and they are going to use in your day to day. Other methods you can actually reduce. For instance, there is array from. There are other methods that we'll be looking as we are doing our exercises. Okay, so thank you for watching up to this point. Thank you for being there. Don't forget to subscribe. If you have not subscribed, please share the video and we can do learn more things together. You can also join our WhatsApp group in the link description. Join our WhatsApp group so that you can ask any question and be part of the dev community. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.